David. Can you see me? Okay, great.
I can see you, Sergey. How are
Okay,
you?
great. So technically we are done.
That's key.
And may I introduce you first?
Sure.
Yeah, sure. So today we have special guest, CEO of LMAX Group, David Mercer. So he's the Chief Executive Officer of LMAX Group and a group headquartered in UK and is leading operator of institutional exchanges for FX and cryptocurrency trading. LMAX Group operates 5 institutional exchanges globally, with client base is over 100 countries. By the way, so it's interesting. I didn't know before reading this introduction that such a wide presence, including all major banks and financial institutions. So, David, thank you for joining us today.
Thanks for having me, Sergey.
And so let's start because this year is so interesting. I think a lot of topics to discuss, and it changed a lot. You, as one of the global players, because your platform covers so many markets and FX in particular. So what do you think? What is your opinion? What make 2020 different from years before?
So there's a couple of things to consider there. First of all is 2020 and obviously this pandemic. So our hearts go out to everyone who's affected by that globally. So specifically, we saw severe market dislocation earlier on this year. But, you know, we're market professionals and capital markets must operate in all seasons. So I think longer term, there's no better time to be in capital markets today, but we all need to be aware of the changes that are going on. So 3 or 4 key pointers there. You have greater market access than there's ever been in capital markets. So that means organizations like LMAX Exchange, many of your banks, funds, asset managers there today, we need to adapt to that wider market access and make sure that we can service every segment of the market. At the same time, you have greater price discovery than ever before, greater transparency in the marketplace. That's something LMAX Exchange has stood for since our inception a decade ago. That's a good thing for the market, but it also means that you must always have precision pricing, and this isn't going to change. You know, in the decade ahead, you're going to have wider market access and greater price transparency, greater price discovery. And part of that is maybe my third key factor, which is low latency enablement, speed. I know there's a lot of consideration out there about speed in the marketplace and the race to zero, but very simply, technology improves every month, every quarter, every year. We need to adapt. All of us in capital markets need to adapt to ensure that we have the most precise pricing at all times. And that becomes more important when you consider the first 2 points of wider market access, so global market access and price discovery. So your price being seen by more participants at all time. I think perhaps the fourth biggest change that you're going to see in the next 5 years, decade at the outside, will be a complete change in the way payments and settlement are conducted in capital markets. So blockchain technology will completely revolutionize the back office of capital markets. And I hope make it more efficient to trade for everyone. So that's it, my sort of 4 key points about the capital markets for the next 5 years.
Yes, thank you. Yeah, because we have some time to discuss it probably in more details. And first of all, I would like to ask you how does LMAX Group and its business model fit into the current FX market structure?
Always happy to talk about LMAX Group, Sergey. Thank you. I mean, for me, it's very simple. Our goal is to be the number one FX club on the street. Already we're the number one crypto club. So if you think about it, probably the audience there, when I walked through the doors of LMAX Group 9 years ago, hadn't heard of LMAX. Well, as of today, we're already in the top 3 FX clubs. We trade $20 billion a day. We have over 35 banks connected. We list 90 currency pairs. We operate 5 exchanges, 3 in London, 1 in New York, and 1 in Tokyo. And that will only extend. I expect there to be more exchanges globally rather than less. So if you like, I take a different route to my competitors. And I think we've always started from the standpoint that we must provide what I talked about in question 1, greater market access. So of course, I need to give our friends down the road a bit more of a challenge over there in Moscow, right? So we need to have more of a presence in every key FX center on the street. But I think today we are particularly relevant. If you're not already connected to LMAX Group, well, I expect you will be in the next year, and feel free to reach out to me. But with every significant proprietary trading firm on the street, every significant bank connected, we're well on our way to achieving our goal to be the number one club.
Yeah, actually, Metallinvestbank recently joined to LMAX as a liquidity provider for ruble, so we hope to increase also our volume there. And I would like to ask you, in particular, through all your execution venues, what did you see during the financial storm in March 2020? What happened with liquidity, spreads, etc.?
So I think to start with, I'd like to congratulate the FX industry. If you compare us as an industry, compare us to what happened in commodity markets, what happened in gold pricing, what happened in oil pricing, what you saw in quite a nascent asset class in crypto pricing. Once again, the FX industry was resilient, was robust. There was two-way pricing at all times. So not just at LMAX Group, but I think generally within the FX industry. What I'd say about what LMAX Exchange does is that we see more and more participants come to firm streaming limit order liquidity at times of extreme market dislocation. And make no mistake, this is what you saw in the middle of March, extreme market dislocation. When you're trading, right, when you need risk transfer, we need to mitigate your risk. You need to have certainty of execution. So certainly, we obviously had record days in the middle of March, $40 billion in one day. Of course, I'm disappointed when that doesn't follow through in April per se. But all I know is every time we have extreme volatility, when we have an extreme market dislocation, we win another customer or 2. In fact, what I say is typically we win 6 on that day, we lose 5 the next day, and slowly but surely, everyone understands that we become more relevant. And particularly in FX, I think that certainty of execution, one of only 3 clubs in the FX market, when people were looking to get out of their risk, right? When you had the severe market dislocation, they came to firm streaming limit order liquidity, not last look liquidity, which is to a penny. So, of course, they were busy days. All our exchanges held up well. We had two-way pricing in all major pairs throughout the turmoil. And from a capital market standpoint, we did well, albeit there was a human capital loss, if you like, going on in the wider world. So, as I say, again, LMAX Group, I couldn't be happy with our performance. And overall, for the FX industry, I'd say congratulations and how we dealt with that dislocation.
Okay, and particularly about the question about the club model. So do you think it's really sustainable? So, and let's say in your version, what is the role of market makers, liquidity provider? Do they have any special, connection, or how it organized?
So you and I discussed this a week or two back. Of course, I like the club model. Of course, I certainly believe compared to every other venue out there, the only place to trade is on a central limit order book. But I do expect there to be a bifurcation of the FX market. So you will always have bilateral disclosed streams for bigger size, for known customers. But every asset class needs a venue for price discovery. Otherwise, we go back to the Wild West of the 80s and 90s, and we don't want to be there. So it's very important that we support the club model. Of course, I believe in it. Of course, I expect that we will be the number one FX club. But we totally understand that we coexist in this wider marketplace where there'll be greater and greater internalization. But at the same time, risk limits are coming down all the time. There are less institutions that want to take risk. So at some stage, you need to externalize. And you want to externalize to a venue where you have clarity of pricing, clarity of rules. At LMAX Group, we've had a published rule book since 2010. And you have that precise, accurate price discovery, something I haven't mentioned before, streamed market data. That's unique in the marketplace. Every tick, not a 5 millisecond snapshot. In my opinion, the legacy venues are wrong for 4.9 milliseconds. The only accurate price at any given time on a club is on LMAX Exchange. With regards to liquidity providers, we have the biggest array of liquidity providers on the street, a good mix of banks and non-banks. I don't think that one particular model will win out. I've always sort of been in a 55-45 split, bank versus non-bank, and sometimes it changes in favor of one or the other. But more and more, maybe 10 years ago, you saw that banks were a little bit slower at adopting low latency technology, but most of them are there now. So what we bring to, if you like, the FX party is wider distribution. So you might say, well, David, all these banks want to price the customers bilaterally. That's okay. It's totally okay. But they perhaps can't access the 180 brokers that we have as customers that we clear for. Perhaps they only want to stream in larger size. Perhaps they don't want to stream 80 currency pairs, plus precious metals, plus oil, plus indices, plus cryptocurrency. So I think, again, it takes a long time to get there in the institutional environment, and generally in FX, participants like the status quo, but the FX ecosystem of the future looks a lot like LMAX Group.
And thank you very much. And also, I could not to ask you actually about the FX Global Code, because LMAX was the first industrial participant to sign up, and a statement of commitment and to adhere to FX Global Code. And so, what do you think? Did FX Global Code help to save integrity of market during 2020?
Yes. Look, I think the Global Code is a very useful initiative. And what I'd say to participants out there is that the alternative is not something we want to consider. So we need to get behind the authors of the code. Now, I'll be the first to say, I do not agree with everything in the code. It was easy for us to be the first signatory. LMAX Group was the first signatory to the code. Why? Because the contentious areas in the code don't occur at any LMAX exchange. So we don't have last look. So all the arguments about pre-trade hedging, and information transfer around last look simply do not exist on an LMAX exchange. So easy for us to sign up to the code. Now, the alternative is that, and you can look down the road at some of my biggest competitors. There's a big commodities house somewhere in the Americas, and make no mistake, they're lobbying for central clearing, right? They're lobbying for the commoditization of FX. I don't believe that can work. I believe spot FX particularly is the best capital market, bar none. FX is the largest asset class, 10 times all the equity exchanges every day, 30 times the fixed income market. It is the best capital market, but as an industry, again, we need to get our house in order. There have been too many, if you like, scandals and fines over the past decade. I think in 2020, the FX market is in a much better place than it was in 2010. So I would encourage everyone to consider their position on the code. I think at the moment that looks like it's our best chance to remain self-regulated. And that's very important for the FX market. The alternative of stringent regulation, which is ill-fitted for FX, will not benefit FX practitioners. So let's do our best to remain self-regulated. And at the same time, we should lobby the writers of the code, the members of the Global Foreign Exchange Committee to change the rules, right? To adapt at all times. And let's try and retain our place as the world's best capital market.
Yeah, I agree with you. Yeah, so we're like sharing the common ideas here. And probably the last question, because we're already approaching to the end of our time session. So what do you think about the future of fixed market structure? What are your ideas, what's the thoughts?
Probably too many for this interview, Sergey, but look, I think we're entering the most exciting time for the FX market, for capital markets in general. So 10 years from now, you're going to see 24/7 markets. At LMAX Group, we already have 24/7 markets. So I know ruble trades on Christmas Day, but it's the same in the crypto market. So yeah, we have to operate a Bitcoin market 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. So every capital market will operate 7 days a week. You're going to have greater market access than ever. You're going to see a merger of this new digital marketplace and traditional FX, fixed income, equity marketplaces. It's not beyond the realms. You'll be trading a central bank digital currency against the S&P or against euro, against Bitcoin, everything with immediate settlement, right? So the blockchain will change everything with regards to payments and settlement. And of course, a lot of that will require significant investment in technology, significant investment in low latency technology. The blockchain isn't there yet. If you look at things like DeFi, the updates via the oracles are every 400 milliseconds, whereas, in the equity markets, you're talking about single-digit microseconds. On LMAX Exchange, you cancel and replace in 80 microseconds. We need to improve, but so does DeFi, so does the crypto space. So I think it's a very exciting place to be. I expect that I'll be sitting here, hopefully, maybe not here, hopefully I can be over in Moscow next time, talking to you about perhaps running 10 global exchanges that operate 24/7. The one thing that's clear in my mind, specifically with the FX market, is that LMAX Exchange will be the #1 FX club not very far from now. So the market structure is changing and capital markets are changing. And I think the next decade will be the most exciting one we've ever entered.
Thank you, David, and please welcome to Moscow next year.
Look forward to it.
Thank you.